Good morning and welcome back. Students, yesterday we talked about George Orwell's essay, Politics and the English Language. And I have told you about the main points of the essay and also explained you the first part of the essay in which Orwell comments on the current state of English language. Today, I'll analyze the first section of the essay for your proper understanding. Actually, in this essay, we are asked to consider the connection between corrupted language and political manipulation. Asked to consider specifically whether ugly language contributes to muddy or foolish thinking. And Orwell believes that it does, although the process is not simple. Political and economic pressures produces ugly language, which then produces foolish thinking. But then foolish thinking produces even uglier language, and this goes on. The cycle continues. For Orwell, this was not a purely philosophical or academic problem. The essay moves towards a position which links the degeneration of language with the rise of totalitarianism. His essay analyzes the corrosive trends in the writing of his day. But decades later, we can still share his disgust and still find a million examples to prove that bad writing and even speaking is a cause of the public's blindness. Orwell explores the function of language in this essay. He analyzes how the corruption of language gives rise to massive political conformity, a consequence that makes the propagandists shiver all over in victory thrills. Orwell criticizes bad writing habits which spread by imitation. The argument which he gives is that writers must rid themselves of these habits and think more clearly about what they say, because thinking clearly is a necessary step toward political regeneration. If you don't think clearly, if you don't think properly, then what will happen? Without proper thinking you will not be able to express yourself in a proper way. Then Orwell chooses 5 specimen or examples or pieces of text. The first one is by Harold Lasky, and in that passage Lasky uses 5 negative words in that passage of 53 words. The next example was of Lancelot Hogben. It is an example of mixed metaphors. Then an essay on psychology in politics, the third example, and this example is simply meaningless. Then another is a communist pamphlet, and this pamphlet we can say is an accumulation of stale phrases. And a reader's letter, the last one is a reader's letter in the magazine Tribune, is an example of words in which the words and meaning they don't go together. So Orwell identifies a catalogue of swindles and perversions which he classifies as dying metaphors, operators or verbal false limbs, pretentious diction, and meaningless words. So these are the reasons responsible for the decline of English language. And then he elaborates about these different reasons, that what dying metaphors are, what are verbal false limbs, what what is pretentious diction and also meaningless words. Orwell notes that writers of modern prose tend not to write in concrete terms but use a pretentious Latinized style. Pretentious Latinized style means that they use a lot of Latin words and the language is showy and pompous. He compares an original biblical text with a parody in modern English to show what he means in this essay. Writers find it easier to stick together or gum together long strings of words than to pick words specifically for their meaning. And this makes all the difference. Okay, this is particularly the case in political writing when Orwell notes that, I quote, orthodoxy seems to demand a lifeless imitative style, unquote. Political speech and writing are generally in defense of the indefensible and so lend to a euphemistic inflated style. He says that thought corrupts language and language can also corrupt thought. Orwell suggests in elementary rules that if followed will prevent the type of faults he illustrates. Although, I quote, one could keep all of them and still write bad English, unquote. Then Orwell makes it clear that he has not been considering the literary use of language, but merely language as an instrument for expressing and not for concealing thought. He also acknowledges his own shortcomings as a writer and says that, I quote, look back through this essay and for certain you will find that I have again and again committed the very faults I am protesting against, unquote. So the power of political propaganda was in the air. Bad writing was in the air and muddy thinking was also in the air. For Orwell, bad writing is stale writing. He blames stale imagery for a host of writing ills. What exactly does he mean? What is a stale imagery? Okay, what does it mean? It is something you have heard before, and stale imagery is about which you have heard before. In fact, the more you keep hearing it, the more you realize you have heard it maybe 1,000 times. You don't even think about it anymore. That is its special mission, to enable you not to think about it anymore. It does your thinking for you. And all you have to do is register only your attention for a nanosecond. Okay, register your attention for a nanosecond. That's all the thinking that's required. Nothing you have to do. For example, if one says, I want to protect my country. It's a stale phrase. Everybody uses it. I want to protect my country. But protect it against what? Against foreign enemies or the freedom of its own citizens? It doesn't mean what these phrases mean. We have completely stopped thinking about them. We don't think about these phrases, the stale phrases, the fixed phrases, the repeated words. They sound familiar, they sound pretty good, and we just accept them. They are stale as hell, but that doesn't stop politicians from using them. In fact, they like to use stale language like this, and the reason behind it is because it's so much less likely to require us to think. These politicians, they don't want us, the people, to think. So why is Orwell so against staleness of imagery and imprecision with words? It's not just the pain of empty language, not because of the language only, for the beauty of the language, although sometimes it is that also, but more importantly, because they lead to vagueness, which can lead to anything, especially in politics. Meaning is sometimes deliberately manipulated, and writers open channels through which I quote, the ready-made phrases come crowding in. They will construct your sentence for you, even think your thought for you to a certain extent, and at need they will perform the important service of partially concealing your meaning even from yourself. You yourself are not able to understand the meaning, what you are writing or what you are saying. Unquote. Orwell insists that the corrosiveness of modern prose is in the air. We breathe, and when we need the right phrase, it just floats down to us ready made. Easy to assemble, euphonic, and effortless. Then further, he says that the only way to keep ourselves from becoming degenerates, part of the problem, is to consciously ask a few relatively simple questions. He says that a scrupulous writer should consider or should think about these 5 questions before he writes. And what are these 5 questions? Number 1, what am I trying to say? Okay, what am I trying to say? What I want to actually communicate. Then, what words will express it? So, choice of the words is also important. Then, what image will make it clearer? Then, is this image fresh enough to have any effect? And then there are 2 more. Could I put it more shortly? And have I said anything that is avoidably ugly? And then to follow some simple advice. So in this way, if we follow Orwell's advice, maybe we can rescue language, we can save language from the uh, power grip of advertisers, the propagandists, the politicians, and others who would subvert it as our primary instrument for creating and expressing thought. So, students, this is the analysis of the first part, the first section of the essay. Hope it's clear to you now. And for tomorrow, we'll continue with the second section of this essay. So, that's all. Thank you.